right. Thank you everyone for attending today's Wednesday webinar. My name is Mike and I am your host today. I've been a systems engineer with Variphy for about a year and a half. We're joined today by Dan. He's also a systems engineer with Variphy. Today he will be presenting an overview of LDAP role-based access. Here's today's agenda. We'll get started with an overview of our company and what we do. Then we'll jump into a demo where Dan will give an in-depth presentation on LDAP role-based access. After that, we'll take a break for some Q&A. And if you have any questions, you can ask them in the Q&A panel in the bottom right corner of your screen. That's not the standard chat panel. There should be like a second Q&A panel in the bottom right corner. After Q&A, we will go ahead and reward one lucky attendee with a $50 Amazon gift card. So make sure you hang around until the end to see if you've won. Quick overview of Variphy. We are the preferred analytics and management solution for Cisco collaboration. We provide industry-leading CDR reporting, call analytics, customizable dashboards, UCCX real-time wallboard reporting and analytics, remote phone control, macros and broadcast, change management, as-built reporting, DN, DID, and dial plan management. And before we get started, Variphy now offers Ninja Enhanced Consulting Services, or NECS. This is when one of our system engineers, like Dan or myself, will engage remotely on a one-on-one basis to provide additional consulting services. It can be on reporting, dashboard configuration, system monitoring, basically anything that our software can do. This provides a dedicated SE to you. We do all the heavy lifting. So for example, if someone needs a report, instead of going to you, they will contact us and we will create the report for them. If you want any additional information, please let one of us know or speak with your account manager, and we'll be more than happy to go over our consulting services more in depth. With all that said, I want to thank everyone for attending. I'm going to pass the ball to Dan, and let's dig into LDAP role-based access.
All right, thank you, Mike, and thank you for everybody joining us on our Wednesday webinar series. Let me go ahead and share out my screen here real quick. Mike, if you could pass me the ball real quick. Thank you. All right. So in today's session, like Mike had said, we're going to really be focusing on one of three ways we could successfully authenticate into the Variphy application. For many of you, you're already authenticating, most likely with a locally built account in the application, and there you'll set all your security parameters and what features the user has access to, et cetera, et cetera. The second mode of authenticating that we do have for your use is single sign-on. So this is where we will point to your third-party IDP or on-prem IDP, and our application is basically redirecting authentication to that IDP and then relaying or redirecting back to our application upon successful authentication. We do have functionality for that as well. In today's session, though, the focus really on Active Directory authentication, where our application will pass authentication to your Active Directory server, and we'll show you the intricacies involved around that, how we can get very, very granular into limiting what a user can do in the application, and more importantly, what they could see in the application. So you may ask, well, why would I just not do local accounts? What's the benefit of an Active Directory authentication system? So like other applications, right, there's sometimes some password policy that must be enforced. As our local application doesn't enforce password policy, we would always recommend to point to AD authentication, because then Active Directory really becomes your password management and maintenance system for that. So if a password needs to be changed every 30 days or every 60 days, right, our application does not have to do that. Active Directory is there for that. And so that's what we rely on LDAP for, okay? So knowing that, today I'm really going to delve deep into three common use cases or user types that we normally see, and how we go about building the necessary setup to allow those users to authenticate via their domain credentials, and also to be able to limit, what they're doing, right? If it's a normal employee type user, they should not have special privileges into the application. We could control all of that with our LDAP authentication. Okay. So first things first, we're gonna take a look into our Active Directory servers. First requirement of this is to point it to one or more Active Directory servers. And with this, what we're going to learn today is that you could basically point it to the same AD server numerous times, just pointing to different areas of that domain. So as an example, I've got 3 here. This is our domain, verify.net. And on this first one, I am pointing to the entire forest. So the entire domain. If I edit this, I'm going to plug in my values saying this is my entire domain. The most important component here is the search base. Okay. Where are we expecting to find users? Okay. So my AD server host name or IP address, the port that you're doing LDAP on. This can also be secure. Okay. So it doesn't need to be regular LDAP. It could be LDAP-S. Search base. And then what attribute are we actually expecting to find a username in? So this is our default SAM account name. Very rarely will this ever need to change, these last 3. Okay. So this is going to be able to discover every user within the Active Directory environment. Okay. And I want to show you the difference between that and, let's say, either a manager's OU or maybe even just an employee's OU, right? Let me take a look at the manager's OU. Okay. So this would be a specific OU that is held for manager type users. Again, we could sniff those out by the search base. And the benefit here is that this gives you a good way of segregating security within the application. Okay. Like I said before, you don't want to give users in the employee OU the same permissions as users within a manager's OU. Okay. So let me bring up my Active Directory server just so you can see here, and some extra tips here that I like to always do just to make the process a little bit easier here. So this is my AD server, and as you kind of saw in that search base, right, on the verify.net domain, I could very well just look at the entire forest. So within all these folders, within all these OUs, find me record type of user, right? But if I really want to segregate those permissions and look at a centrally focused OU, I do have the option to do that. Like in that example, I was pointing to my manager's OU, right? And in this case, in my environment, my test environment, my manager for the finance department is Bruce Wayne, okay, Batman. We're going to be picking on Bruce Wayne here in just a little bit. Compare that to the administrator's OU. And this could be dedicated to Verify as well. It's not necessarily a domain administrator, but it can be. I myself am the administrator of Verify, so we're going to be sniffing that out separately and giving different permissions for these 3 different types of users. So admins, managers, and what we call SSO users are our normal employees. Okay. All right. An extra tip here to really get an understanding of LDAP, right? There's lots of attributes, and it's almost impossible to remember all the attribute names that we need to know in order to successfully authenticate. So one thing that I always suggest in Active Directory, and if you're a AD admin, you probably already do this, but under View in Active Directory users and computers, under View, always check the advanced features. That's going to give us the ability to say for any specific user profile, let's pick on Bruce Wayne here. This gives you the attribute editor tab. And so what we will want to know or capture a specific search base is the distinguished name attribute, right? All you need to do is double click this and basically copy this out minus the user, because we're not trying to search against the user. You're just trying to search against the OU structure. You copy that out, and that is basically what you would see in our application. That's exactly what you copy out. Okay. All right, so knowing that, everything else is done in Verify. The application must have an instance of username or groups. A group essentially is a virtual container that holds 1 or more users, and that group is where you could associate those security permissions into the application. Okay, so in this case, remember we're working with 3 separate different types of users. We have administrators that should be seeing everything, or a super admin essentially, a manager type employee that should only see their department's data. In this case, I'm working with finance. So manager called Batman is the manager of the finance department. We want to limit that exposure to only that finance department's call records, nothing else. And then last but not least, an example of individual employees that should only see their own data and nothing else. We're going to show you how to accomplish this with some examples. Okay. Okay. So let's start off very easy. Let's start off as an admin type user. And that is what I am logged in as right now. Again, that user still needs to be provisioned within the Variphy application. If I edit my user here, this is my AD instance of the account. This is not a local account, but notice that my Dan user is pointing to a Variphy.net admin group. Okay, so I want to point out the fact that these groups are configured here as well. User groups, I'm going to scroll down to my group, and we're going to edit the admin group. Okay, there's not much to this except that you're saying that this group, or every user that falls within this group, is authenticating against an AD server source that you've previously configured. Okay, this signed users is backwards compatible to allow you to associate pre-existing users to the group. And at the user level, if the group is created at the user level, you could also throw that user into that group as well. The benefit here is, though, you don't have to necessarily associate application-based privileges per user. You're associating that to the group. Every user that rolls up into that group inherits that group security. Okay, so as I scroll below, this is a super admin group, right? So there's nothing more needed than just the administrator checkbox. That's great, super easy. But let's talk a little bit about some of the more restricted visibility into the application. So that's the manager, the Bruce Wayne here, the manager of the finance department, and individual employees. We've got an employee named Eleanor Fox. I'm going to be showing you guys how to set up those types of users with restricted data visibility. Okay, so what I've done is I've gone ahead and created the 3 individual groups based off of the types of feature access that they need and restricted data visibility access for the call analytics feature. So let's first look at the managers group. Okay, so this is the finance manager group. We have Batman here that is a user of this group. Again, if you have other users within your organization that need the same rights, you can very well add as many users as you need. All those users will inherit this group security. Okay, scrolling down now, notice that the administrator checkbox is not checked. They should not have access to everything like logs, like changing the system application settings. They won't see the setup icon even up here if they log in with their domain credentials. So when they log in, they're only going to be able to see the option to change their user settings, which is basically time zone information, and password is not even existent in this case because we're signing with LDAP credentials. We do want these users to have access to their own dashboard. So you can see that I've checked the dashboards icon there. And here's where it gets interesting here is the cluster privilege. You can associate what clusters this user has access to or can access features within. All of these are on-off toggles except the call analytics feature. So focusing on the call analytics module, this manager should only have access to call data, but for a restricted set of call records. Okay, so when you select call analytics, you can see that it asks you, do you want this user to be able to see all CDR data? In this case, we do not want that. Okay, we want to restrict their visibility to only the finance department. So I'm going to check accordingly. I said, yes, we want to restrict their data visibility. And yes, they should be able to access create widgets on their dashboard, have access to reports, and also have access to the call history search tool. Okay. Down below, the restricted visibility settings. If you check the restricted data visibility settings, one of these 4 items on the left here are required. The first 3 are referencing to the information that's stored in Call Manager. Okay, so I want to direct myself over to Call Manager here real quick. And since my Active Directory is syncing up with my call manager, it's kind of just a trickle down effect, right? Every couple hours, my data from AD is syncing to my call manager, and that's what we communicate with to find out and successfully manage these restricted data visibility settings. Okay, so if I go into my users here, okay, I know Batman is my manager, and that's the user that is associated to this group in question. So if I click on Batman's here, we see that, yes, the department's coming in from AD. That's great. When we are selecting view own department, we're literally looking up the usernames that associate to this group, in this case, Batman, and we're finding that Batman is owned to finance. Okay, so without any manual configuration within the application, we're auto determining that from the lookup in call manager, this user Batman is assigned to the finance department. Okay, same exact concept for these other two, just more of a restricted visibility. The manager is basically the same exact concept, but instead of basing it off of department, you're basing it off of the manager ID field within the CUCM end user profile. Okay. Notice here, I do not use manager ID fields in my profile, so that's why I'm not going to use that in this demonstration. But we're basically creating a virtual group that says every profile with the same manager ID field, we're going to create a virtual group of those users. And then obviously the user that matches that manager ID field, we determine they are the manager, and then they can see everyone else's data with the matching manager ID field. That's how we go about doing that. But for today's purposes, I'm going to show you basically the same exact concept, but as department. Okay. So if I were to log in here as Batman, you can immediately see that Batman has restricted access into the application, meaning you're not seeing all the different tools because those on-off toggles were not selected. The only thing that was selected was call analytics and dashboard. So that's the only thing that we see here. Okay. Furthermore, if I do any search within the application under the Batman account, go to the correct cluster here. Yeah, that's fine. And then I'm going to say the previous 30 days because that's what I know I have data for. We're going out and finding, it should be about 800 or so, oh, maybe more, 1,200 calls here. But notice I've thrown in the columns that show us what department these calls are, what departments are involved with these calls, whether they are originating from this department or if they're terminating in this department. That's what we're bringing back. But notice it's restricted to only the finance department. Okay, so with this data visibility restriction of use as own department, right, we're looking up that user's department in call manager, all synced from AD, of course. We're finding that it's finance. And so when they log in, they're only seeing finance data. Okay. Now, this is just one example. The next example is more of a generalized employee-based report, right? They should only see data for themselves, nothing else. Okay, so I've got a user here called Eleanor Fox that is an employee of the finance department. They're not seeing, all the various extensions within finance. They're only going to be able to see calls for their own extension or own device in this case. Okay, so to illustrate that, I want to log back in as the system admin just so I could show you how to set this up. Okay, so logging in is system admin. And under the group, we want to take a look at the employees group because there's a little bit more configuration going on into the employees group to do the magic on the back end. All right, so we have our user, eFox, okay? Notice again, we're not associating security permissions or anything at the user level. It's all coming from the group level. This tells us, yes, inheriting from the employees group. So I'm going to jump myself over into the employees group and spend a couple minutes there. Okay, so again, we're looking at the AD source entire domain. Again, if you want a more segregated look at this, you could create your AD source to a specific search space pointing to that OU. That's perfectly fine. We've got one user called eFox in here. If this were in production, you'd likely see many users part of this group. And that's a good bearing too, because what we're about to show you here is with the restricted data visibility, no matter who the user, they're still only going to be able to see their own data in the reports that are delivered to them daily. In this case, we're doing daily call reports for these users. Okay. So again, limited privileges. They can only change their time zone. They should be able to have access to dashboard, no other tools except CDR. Okay, but note the differences here. Okay, this user should only be seeing data for their own user. So again, we're going back to Call Manager. We're looking up this user ID, eFox. Okay, we're saying that eFox owns this extension and or this device as part of this department, but no matter what this user searches for, they're only going to be able to see calls that involve this extension. Okay, that's what view as own user does. One additional thing, this is optional, but I wanted to show you guys that as an admin, I could say for eFox, Eleanor, when they log in, they will automatically see this report. Now I've created this report as an admin. Okay, so if I go into my reports tool, I'll show you here real quick, the ability to share reports, but even though it's a shared report, when they access that report, it's only going to show that restricted data. Okay. So here's my employees all calls. I built this as the system administrator. If I edit this, you could see that it's a very, very basic report. Okay, search sets. In fact, I'm not even searching for explicit extensions or explicit devices. This is a catch-all report. So show me all calls going to any 4-digit extension, initiated to or presented to any 4-digit extension. But the key here is I want to share this out. Me as an admin sharing this out report or sharing this report out enables me to, back in the group, to associate that report to that group. So when anybody from that group signs in, they're going to see only that report as read-only access. Okay? So again, that's in user groups. And then within the group, all the way at the bottom, you could say reporting permissions. I've selected the shared out report called employees all calls, and I'm giving read-only access. So when these users log in, they are not going to be able to edit the report or delete the report, of course. It's read-only. Okay. So at this point, let's act as if we are the employee logging in for the first time, so we can see what we have for ourselves. Okay, so I'm going to log off of the admin. I'm going to sign in as eFox, which is the just general finance employee. All right, again, notice very limited capabilities here, dashboard access only and call analytics and reporting. Okay, I'm going to go straight to reports here. And you can see now that I have my shared report that's been shared out with me. Okay, so as an employee, right, I don't have the delete option. I don't have any edit option even. I could only read this report. So I could run it only basically. Okay, and of course this all could be scheduled out as well. I do have some pre-made reports here just to give you some examples of what an employee report can actually look like. All right, so again, notice the report. The search criteria is all calls made to or received by a 4-digit extension. But note that with this restricted data visibility, with the view as own user checkbox, I'm only seeing calls going to Eleanor, right? 2612, box Eleanor. To the contrary, I might see, now in this report, I'm grouping it by the direction of the call. So these are all my inbound calls. So I'd expect outside numbers calling in over my SIP trunk, presented to Eleanor. And so with this, I could see that there are about 17 inbound calls for Eleanor. Okay, scrolling down, we're grouping by the outbound direction, right? Sorry, internal direction. A lot of internal calls, 84 internal calls that Eleanor was involved with. And then again, just redirecting ourselves here. The last call type is outbound. All right, so 23 outbound calls, average call duration, some other summary statistics, but here are the details for these calls. Again, I always love to point out the concept of cradle to grave. So for Eleanor, right, I could see, is Eleanor just transferring these calls off, or are they starting in UCCX or a voicemail call handler, something like that. But that's what that link on the side here. One last step to this is you may ask yourself, well, do I get any sort of breakout by time on this data? Yes, we could do that. Okay, this is with the use of rate tables, of course, right? If you associate the call types of inbound, internal, outbound. We're classifying those initially. We're grouping by our call type. So same report, just some extra call analytics included. So for my inbound calls, I could certainly click that for my details. It's going to direct me right here. But notice the time. I ran this report for 30 days, previous 30 days. And so for each day, I now see how many inbound calls, internal calls, or outbound calls do I have with the automatic data visibility restriction taking place on the backside. Again, these are only calls to Eleanor. If Jane Doe, let's say, got logged in with their own user and got this same report, that report would only be generated with Jane Doe's calls. Okay, so that is the benefit there of the 4 matching options: the view as own user, view as department, view as manager ID, in connection with the authentication of call manager, or sorry, Active Directory. Okay, so I hope that you guys saw some benefit of connecting to Active Directory. Again, password management is a pretty big thing nowadays. Instead of forcing us to maintain passwords, you could have AD do that, and it just trickles down into the application. So AD for authentication, and then the various reports and data visibility restrictions and user/group creations. A lot of granularity coming into all of that. So that is all I have for today. Thank you, everyone, for your attention. Mike, I will pass it back over to you, sir.
Excellent. Thank you, Dan. Great job. Let me share my screen. And here we go. All right, off to Q&A. Not a lot on the QA side, Dan. Just one big question. If a user has a lot of Active Directory or LDAP users, can we import them into the system?
Yeah, that's a great question. And we hear this from time to time again. So in today's current release, we are not actually importing those users. We still have to manually provision those users, either locally or assign that user to an AD source, or just throw those manually created users into a group that's pointing to an AD source. However, we do have on the roadmap the ability to look up users and import those automatically. So that is on a roadmap. Our thought here is that with the creation of AD security groups, right, you could associate, let's say 10 users into an AD security group. We point to that AD security group. We find all those 10 users, but in our application, we would have the configuration that says anyone that we find within this source, the AD security group, now inherits the application security. So that is coming. We've identified that. That's definitely a need, but it is on the roadmap. Yep.
Excellent. Thank you, sir. Last chance. All right. Any more Q&A questions? Going once? Going twice? All right. Then we will go on to the winner of today's Amazon gift card. The winner is Michelle Sherborne. Congratulations. We'll have your account manager reach out to you soon. I want to thank everyone for attending today. We do live webinars every Wednesday. Our next webinar will be on September 2nd at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. Vic and I will go over building UCCX agent and CSQ reports, including the new features coming out for the CCX reports in Variphy version 12.2. Thank you everyone for attending. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, everybody. Good afternoon. Bye-bye.